She had everything. 2 million followers, 6-figure monthly income, the perfect Miami lifestyle. Kourtney Clenny was living the dream every influencer craved. OnlyFans royalty. Her boyfriend Christian Obumseli seemed to complete the picture. Successful crypto trader. Charming. Devoted. They moved to Miami together. The penthouse. The parties. The Instagram perfect relationship. But behind the filtered photos and viral videos, something darker was brewing. April 3rd, 2022, 1:11 p.m. A frantic 911 call shattered their perfect facade. Kourtney's voice trembled through the phone. "My boyfriend is dying. I think I killed him." Christian Obumseli lay bleeding on their penthouse floor, a kitchen knife nearby. The woman who built an empire selling fantasy had created a nightmare she couldn't edit. She claimed self-defense. But the evidence would tell a very different story. This is the story of how paradise became a crime scene, how love became murder, and how Kourtney Clenny's perfect life ended in blood. If you're finding value in this, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. But behind the perfectly curated social media posts lay a relationship spiraling into darkness. Neighbors at their Miami apartment complex began reporting disturbing sounds coming from their unit. Violent screaming matches that echoed through the thin walls at all hours of the night. The sound of objects being thrown, glass breaking, doors slamming with devastating force. Multiple residents complained to building management about the constant domestic disturbances. But the chaos wasn't limited to their own four walls. Christian's family had been watching their relationship with growing alarm for months. They witnessed firsthand Kourtney's controlling grip over their son. She monitored his phone calls, isolated him from longtime friends, tracked his every movement. Family members begged Christian to leave. He always made excuses for her behavior. But the warning signs were escalating into something far more sinister. Evidence would later reveal this wasn't their first physical altercation. Police had been called to their address twice in the previous 6 months. Each time, both parties claimed everything was fine. The officers had no choice but to leave. But on this particular night in April, there would be no explaining away what was about to unfold. April 3rd, 2022. A date that would forever divide Kourtney Clenny's life into before and after. The morning started like any other in their Miami high-rise. But beneath the surface, something was brewing. Christian had spent the previous night elsewhere. When he returned home that afternoon, the tension was immediate. Building on what we covered about their volatile relationship, this wasn't unusual. But today would be different. Neighbors would later report hearing shouting from their apartment around 4:30 in the afternoon. The argument escalated quickly, voices raised, objects thrown. The familiar pattern of their toxic dance reaching its crescendo. What happened next would transform a domestic dispute into a murder case that captivated the nation. At 4:57 p.m., Kourtney called 911. Her voice was frantic, desperate. She claimed Christian had attacked her, that she'd defended herself, that it was all his fault. But Christian Obumseli lay dying from a single stab wound to the chest. The knife had pierced his heart. When paramedics arrived, they found Kourtney covered in blood. She was hysterical, playing the victim perfectly. But even in those first moments, something didn't add up about her story. As Christian was rushed to the hospital, Courtney's performance was just beginning. Christian Obumseli was pronounced dead at 5:25 p.m. He was 27 years old. When police arrived at that blood-soaked apartment, Courtney had her story ready. She painted herself as the victim, a terrified girlfriend defending her life. Quote, "He came at me with the knife. I had no choice but to fight back. But forensic experts were about to shatter that carefully crafted lie." The blood spatter patterns told a completely different story. Christian's wounds were concentrated on his back and sides. Defense wounds were minimal. This wasn't self-defense. This was a sustained attack on a retreating victim. The knife's trajectory analysis revealed the killer stood over Christian as he fell. But perhaps most damning was the body camera footage from responding officers. Courtney showed no signs of distress, no tears, no trauma. Instead, she was cold, calculating, already working her next angle. When confronted with the forensic evidence, her story began to shift. Each contradiction pulled another thread from her carefully woven defense. The perfect victim narrative was crumbling, and investigators knew it. While Christian's family buried their son, Courtney Clenny continued posting on social media. For months, she lived freely in Hawaii while detectives quietly built their case. The Miami-Dade Police Department knew they had one chance to get this right. Cell phone evidence painted a disturbing picture of escalating violence leading up to the murder. Text messages revealed Courtney's threats to kill Christian just days before his death. Security footage from their building showed a pattern of domestic abuse that contradicted her story. The medical examiner's report delivered the final blow to her self-defense claim. Christian's wounds told a story of an attack, not a struggle for survival. On August 10, 2022, police finally moved to arrest Courtney. She was found at a rehabilitation facility, supposedly receiving treatment for PTSD. 4 months after Christian's murder, Courtney finally faced charges of second-degree murder. The influencer who once commanded millions of followers now faced life behind bars. Her extradition to Florida would mark the beginning of the final chapter in this deadly romance. The courtroom fell silent as Courtney Clenny entered for her murder trial. Gone was the polished influencer. In her place sat a defendant facing life in prison. Her legal team doubled down on the self-defense narrative. They painted Christian as the aggressor. The prosecution had other plans. Building on the evidence we covered, prosecutors systematically dismantled every claim Courtney made. The knife wound trajectory, the lack of defensive wounds on Christian. The elevator footage became the star witness. 12 jurors watched Courtney attack Christian just hours before his death. Her defense crumbled. As we discussed, Christian's family had waited 2 years for justice. Now they faced the woman who destroyed their world. Christian's mother delivered a devastating impact statement. She described a son full of life. Dreams cut short by a woman's rage. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours. When they returned, their faces told the story before the verdict was read. Guilty of second-degree murder. The self-defense lie had finally collapsed under the weight of evidence. Courtney's face remained expressionless as the judge sentenced her to life in prison. 25 years minimum before parole consideration. The influencer who once commanded millions of followers would now spend decades behind bars. Her only audience, prison guards and fellow inmates. This case exposes a darker truth about social media culture. Behind the perfect posts and curated lives, real people suffer real consequences. Courtney Clenny traded her ring lights for prison fluorescents, her followers for a life sentence. Her influence